Today, at the National Cathedral in Washington, America said goodbye to the man who led America to the moon, Neil Armstrong.
Neil Armstrong, the iconic astronaut who famously took one giant leap for mankind, passed away 11 years ago. Now his family has come forth to confirm the rumors, shedding light on the shocking truth behind the speculations and rumors surrounding his life. Bringing back several memories of man's historic mission to space, we can only help but ask what rumors his family could hold that the world doesn't know. Does it have anything to do with his journey to space? Let's uncover the truth. It's been 11 years since the world bid farewell to Neil Armstrong, the iconic figure who took that historic one small step, yet one giant leap for mankind. Yet even in his absence, Armstrong's legacy continues to captivate minds and hearts around the globe. Recent rumblings regarding his family confirming rumors have reignited conversations about this space pioneer. The legacy of the man who journeyed to the moon endures, leaving an everlasting impression in history. Neil Armstrong's name echoes through time as the first to reach the moon. Praises for his accomplishment continue to honor his memory across generations. Armstrong is admired by many for being a source of inspiration to achieve the impossible. Being revered by men and women from all age groups, the man is hailed as the embodiment of courage and determination. Some refer to him as an icon, trailblazer, and pioneer. Several others refer to him as the hero who stood tall to represent the goals of humanity. This goes a long way to show how great of a man he was. Looking back at the early life of Neil Armstrong, he wasn't always a big shot, and neither was he a role model to anyone. Born on August 5, 1930, in the small town of Wapakoneta, Ohio, his beginnings were humble, like many other Americans at the time. Although growing up during the Great Depression, you can say he imbibed the values of resourcefulness and resilience from his parents, Stephen and Viola Armstrong. As a child, Armstrong was fascinated with airplanes and keenly interested in how they majestically glided across the skies. Quickly nurturing his passion for planes, his father took him to air shows nationwide. Perhaps these experiences ignited the young man's spark, fueling his desire to take flight beyond Earth's boundaries. Known for his relentless curiosity and disciplined mind, Armstrong excelled in all his academic pursuits. He even secured a scholarship to Purdue University in 1947, despite the distractions and challenges posed by the Korean War. However, his path took a different turn when he was called up to serve as a naval aviator in the U.S. Navy. As a military man, Neil Armstrong flew 78 combat missions during the war, always returning to his beloved nation. Eventually, his experience in air combat and piloting honed his determination to reach for the stars. After obtaining a degree in aeronautical engineering as a civilian, one could say that Neil Armstrong moved closer to what would later become his life's greatest achievement, and that of humankind. Following his graduation, he entered the realm of experimental aviation and space exploration. This is where he first got involved in the X-15 rocket plane program, where he attained astonishing speeds and altitudes that he never reached in his entire life. He later joined NASA's astronaut program in 1962, and the rest is history. At the time when the United States was racing with the Soviet Union on who'd get to space first, the manhunt for a team who'd materialize the dream was also underway. As easy as it might have sounded, the search wasn't easy. It was one thing to see someone with all the skills and experience, and it was another to see someone with the zeal, determination, and spirit to put everything on the line. In all its entirety, the search for the Apollo 11 mission wasn't merely a search for astronauts. It was way more than that. NASA was looking for pioneers of unshakable spirit. These people could withstand and overcome the pressure of the unknown in an instant. However, that wasn't all. They had to be people with exceptional technical prowess to work, communicate, and adapt under pressure. All these qualities were what NASA saw in Neil Armstrong, Edwin Buzz Aldrin, and Michael Collins when they picked them for Apollo 11. However, somehow they weren't enough. The truth is that, at the time, humans didn't know what they were up against. Even though we had successfully managed to send a couple of satellites into space, The idea of humans making it that far was mostly based on theoretical speculations from different scientists, not regarding the authenticity of the spacesuits or the spacecrafts. Anything could have easily gone wrong quickly. For one, Neil Armstrong and his crew could have easily faced issues from the moon's gravitational pull, or they might have had a malfunction or ran out of fuel on their journey. And so, due to all these unforeseen uncertainties, NASA had to make survivors out of the men. What did they do? They subdued the men through a rigorous training regime that spanned years. During the training, they were put through simulations of every conceivable scenario, from the takeoff to the lunar landing. They had to work not only on their precision, but they had to do so with a certain poise. While at it, they were taught to prepare for countless emergencies that might arise, getting them ready for any change of event. With physical fitness being one of the top training regimes for survival, they underwent physical conditioning to continuously break their endurance limits. They were often left in jungles with little to nothing to fend for themselves, further building their adaptability and endurance skills. Still, that wasn't all. While NASA wanted to ensure the men's survival, they also wanted the mission to succeed. For it to have turned out so, the men had to accomplish their primary objective, relaying information about the moon and space, and their secondary objective, which was getting the materials that scientists needed for analysis. For all of that to have been possible, proper communication between the crew and mission control was crucial. Due to this fact, NASA devised a complex system of communication suited to each man, teaching Armstrong and his crew how to accurately use them to relay and receive information from mission control. In all its entirety, the preparations and measures in place appeared sufficient. However, Neil Armstrong and his crew were not fully prepared for what unfolded on D-Day, nor did they anticipate it. The profound experiences of these men become even more intriguing. The Apollo 11 mission, what went wrong, and how did Neil Armstrong and his crew make it unfazed? Inasmuch as the Apollo 11 mission was regarded as a success and technological triumph in the history of man, it surely didn't come without its challenges. If we are talking about challenges, Neil Armstrong and his crew faced many of them themselves. All it would have taken was just a single miscalculation and hesitation on their part, and Apollo 11 wouldn't only have been lost. Still, the men would have lost their lives. Going back in time, let's give an in-depth account of what happened on the day of Apollo 11's takeoff, starting with the spacecraft itself. Firstly, you should know that the Apollo 11 spacecraft comprised three main components. This includes the command module, the service module, and the lunar module. These components were put together to overcome the harsh challenges of space travel. Still, they didn't do as much as expected. For one, the command module, where the men were supposed to live during their journey, was cramped, and there was minimal room for Armstrong and his men to move. Posing psychological and physical damages at the same time, they had no choice but to bear the experience throughout the 8-day journey. What about the lunar module? It also posed the same problem, just as the command module. It wasn't spacious, making it pretty hard to maneuver the ascent and descent engines of the compartment. Furthermore, we can't even begin to fathom the limitations of the computers at the time. To narrate how unbelievable the Apollo 11 spacecraft was, it was made from computers with lesser processing speed than our modern-day calculators. For the astronauts to use these computers, they had to manually input commands, making the process highly prone to error. Considering all of these, what's probably going through your head now is there's no way they could pull it off with so many limitations. Well, you are right, but not entirely. Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin did make it to the moon, but not entirely with the help of NASA. The issue started when the crew took off from Earth in the Apollo 11. By the time they were midway deep into the atmosphere, they were already experiencing surges and disruptions in the computer systems. However, being not as severe, they easily waved off the event as something caused by the turbulence they were experiencing. Little did they know of the difficulty that awaited them when they arrived in space. By the time the command module was supposed to separate from the lunar module to enable the latter to ascend to the moon, something utterly unsettling happened. Mission Control couldn't establish a radio connection with the lunar module. This created quite a lot of panic in Mission Control. Basically, every department on the ground was racking its head on how to solve the problem, but to no avail. Buzz Aldrin had adjusted the antenna severally on the other end of space, but the transmission kept fluctuating. It was one of those times filled with global tension. Many people had tuned in to follow the mission, and the cracks from the audio from space weren't assuring. The men had indeed maintained a certain level of composure. Still, they were only humans, and you could tell the hint of fear from their voices as they tried to establish communication. It was only barely after the director in charge, Gene Kranz, had given the go-ahead for power descent that things got worse. Not so long after the order, the master alarm in the lunar module went off, and it signaled Mission Control. The cause of the alarm was a 1202 error code, which signaled an overload in the working operations of the computer. Thus, Mission Control was faced with two options: shutting down and rebooting the systems or aborting the mission entirely. Not having the means to do the latter, they were handicapped on both sides. Now, take a moment to imagine what it must have been like for Neil Armstrong and Buzz Aldrin, staring at an error code they knew nothing of, and at the same time, maneuvering the lunar compartment towards the landing zone given to them by Mission Control. The truth is, they were flying blind all through the journey. Knowing that fact, they had to take powers into their hands and trust their gut. Taking manual control of the landing and the situation, Neil Armstrong requested the vital numbers to make a safe landing. This included the speed, altitude, and other critical data, and Buzz was quick enough to call out these numbers for him. Even though these men knew they had overshot the predicted land zone, they were still willing to take their chances. Besides, they didn't have enough fuel to dilly-dally, so they landed between a crater field and a collection of giant boulders. What echoed into the ears of the unknowing but yet curious and anxious Mission Control room up next was, "The Eagle has landed." As miraculous as this story is, it took these men's quick thinking and adaptability skills to avert what would have been one of the greatest disasters of humankind. And if we are being honest, they aren't nearly celebrated enough for their accomplishments. What were the rumors about the Apollo 11 mission, and how true were they? Like many stories about men in space, there have been many rumors concerning the amount of information that NASA is letting on to the public. Several conspiracy theorists believe that right from the beginning, NASA was never transparent. They were merely working as a government space intelligence body, hence hoarding vital information regarding all happening in space. This conspiracy theory stretches way back to the Apollo 11 mission. One of the rumors that have lingered for decades, even before Neil Armstrong's death, is that he and his crew spotted a UFO during their historic journey. This theory only bore fruit due to the transcripts of a conversation between the astronauts and NASA's Mission Control. Armstrong radioed in as the men covered the land on the third day of the journey, describing something he believed to be huge. While narrating the event, he also claimed to have seen a spacecraft on the far edge of the crater, claiming they weren't alone. While Mission Control quickly promised to address the matter that Armstrong and his crew were facing, there was an immediate disconnection of the audio feed from the public. Was that a coincidence? Well, the moon landing experts and conspiracy experts don't believe so. The words going around are that it's most likely NASA never made it to the moon, or they found proof of extraterrestrial life and decided to hide it from the public. The debate about this supposed UFO sighting has raged ever since, with the skeptics believing that Armstrong said those words under pressure or a lack of understanding of his environment. The theories continue. Although Armstrong never talked about the incident again when he made his way to Earth, which creates room for suspicion. On the other hand, William Rutledge, who claimed to be a member of the secret Apollo 20 mission that was assumed to have failed, had much to say. According to the whistleblower, the Apollo 20 mission was disclosed as a failed mission because of the intent behind the space visit. William Rutledge believed everything was being pushed under the rug from missions 18 and 19 when research data went missing. Giving a proper account of Apollo 20, he said that for him and his crew, the mission was to land next to an alien ship believed to be 1.5 million years old and study its features. However, on entering inside, they found the bodies of the pilot of the UFO. One of them, a humanoid female, had genitals and hair, and there were aerobatic devices connected to her eyes and fingers. In the spaceship were also unknown stones exuding a yellow substance, and small body remains were everywhere. And now the question is, was William Rutledge making all that up? The truth is, it's his words against NASA's. While most people believed him to have provided the several missing links to the Apollo missions, many others think his words don't hold any weight whatsoever. What about Neil Armstrong's family? Did they have anything to say in the matter? Not. It's possible that not just Neil Armstrong, but his family must have signed a consensus of non-disclosure with NASA, or they simply didn't hear anything from Armstrong himself. However, his wife spotted something quite peculiar believed to have been hidden 4 decades after Neil Armstrong's death. It was a white bag containing items like the camera used to record his arrival on the moon, a waist rope for support, and a few other useful items for the journey. While it's rumored that the video recording must have been taken out, no one knows whether the saying is true. Carol eventually sent the sack and its contents to the National Air and Space Museum. Having lived a fulfilled but not entirely transparent life, you should know that Neil Armstrong didn't die of natural course or due to exposure to life outside of Earth. If NASA did one thing right, it was to make sure that not just Armstrong but his crewmates were quarantined, monitored, and checked for weeks to ensure they were sound of mind and body. Even after they had discharged the men from quarantine, NASA still made time to send medical representatives to ensure that the health status of the men was right. Dying at the age of 82, what led to this great man's demise was the carelessness of the medical team in charge of his cardiovascular surgery. As for the sons of Neil Armstrong, they said that the mismanagement and aftercare of Mercy Health Fairfield Hospital cost the past astronaut's life. Truly, this isn't hard to believe, as exposure to unaccounted danger by the team could have easily led to his death swing, and they might not have been able to handle the situation on time. One can say the affirmation of the words of his family even got cemented when they were willing to pay $6 million as a settlement to prevent the news from going public. Struggling to keep face, they wanted all the settlements and secrets to remain a secret. Still, the family wasn't easily swayed by the money. If we are to be honest, for an extraordinary being such as Neil Armstrong, that wasn't a good way to go. However, his brilliance and early years of achievement somehow overshadow all there is about the man. At 91 years old, Buzz Aldrin, one of the iconic Apollo 11 astronauts, continues to inspire as he lives on. Like Armstrong, his remarkable journey to the moon remains etched in history. While Aldrin's vibrant spirit persists, the sad truth is that Michael Collins, the skilled pilot who manned the command module during that historic mission, has passed away. Collins played a crucial role in the success of Apollo 11 by orbiting the moon alone, while Armstrong and Aldrin ventured onto its surface. The truth is his contributions to space exploration and his willingness to be the solitary link between his fellow astronauts and Earth marked him as an unsung hero. However, the loss of Collins is deeply felt. His memory lives on as part of humanity's exploration of the cosmos. Thanks for watching. You must see this video you see on your screen right now.